Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Welcome everyone. Very happy to be here with you today in this beautiful temple in front of Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Srimad Mahaprabhu, and Shri Shri Lakshmi Nrsingadev. And we are continuing to speak about the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the Amala Purana, or the spotless Purana. The scriptures are a way that we connect with the great teachers and with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the spiritual worlds for ourselves. In fact, the Supreme Personality of Godhead speaks about himself, for instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, and there are others who hear from Krishna and they elaborate about Krishna's position, and they give their realizations and expansion of and expand the topic of the Supreme for the benefit of everyone. The original Vedas are eternal, and they manifest in human society by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're called Apurushaya, or from a non-human source. That is, they are not affected by the 4 defects of human beings, which include the defect of cheating. That is, someone may not know something, but then they speculate and they say, maybe it's like this, or I think it's like that. And the senses are imperfect. One cannot, with one's senses, ascertain what's going on beyond this room, but still one tries to give information about that. And there are distractions that come constantly into the mind and senses, which take one away from a clear understanding of knowledge. And all these disqualify the limited being in this world from giving perfect knowledge. But if one accepts knowledge from the right source and represents it according to the original teaching, then one can transmit perfect knowledge. And the great sages have, like Srila Vyasadeva, who is called the literary incarnation of God, have brought us the various Vedas, which he divided into parts and gave to his disciples, and also the Puranas, of which there are 18. And there are 6 in the mode of ignorance, 6 in the mode of passion, and 6 in the mode of sattva gun. And of all the Puranas, the Srimad Bhagavatam is called the Amala Purana, or the spotless Purana. It's completely transcendental. And the only subject matter is self-realization and clear understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And actually it was brought to us by Srila Vyasadeva after he compiled all the other Vedas and Puranas, and was still feeling incomplete and despondent. And in that situation, he went to his spiritual master and he asked for advice. Why do I feel despondent? And his spiritual master told him that you have not completely given the description of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the benefit of everyone, and therefore, in a way, you've cheated people. Naishkarmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam. Even if you describe self-realization, which is beyond fruit of work in this world, still, if one doesn't get achuta bhava, or a clear understanding and feeling for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then still one is left to the forces of material nature. Eventually one will be swept away, because one has to become fascinated with the actual features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, everyone has a connection to the Supreme Lord, even in the most primary forms of life we call annamoy, or absorption in food. Even small plankton in the ocean that are eating have that connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He appears to them in that form. And others in more advanced forms of life then realize that they're alive, and then some come to the point of the intellect, and beyond that there is anandamoy, or realization of one's eternal existence. As Srila Prabhupada likes to say, yoga means plus. Our life beyond the negativity of the material world and beyond even the void which negates the material world. And that's the yoga means plus. And that's what Srimad Bhagavatam is. It's a description of the world of Krishna, where everyone is engaged in eternal transcendental loving service, and they are connected to the Lord through pure love, which is ultimately the quest of every soul, to have a complete, full loving relationship. In this material world, even, we can see that everyone is searching out that kind of relationship. They want rasa. They want a relationship. A family comes together and they enjoy certain relationships. However, those relationships are soon broken by time or by disagreement, or by death and so forth. And they can't be sustained. And therefore, there are millions of songs and poems about how I had love and I lost it, and so forth. And in this material world, the Bhagavatam says there's an ocean of tears. And that ocean is formed from the crying of all living entities in this material world due to separation from these loving relationships. So the Bhagavatam comes and teaches us what is that loving relationship, that rasa, that is never broken. Actually, we are always connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So nitya nitya sambandha prakritischa paraivasa. We have an eternal kinship with the Lord, but that has been forgotten and obscured due to my connection with the material nature and being overwhelmed by it since a time immemorial. And the subject of Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to revive that eternal loving relationship that I have with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we find that the speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the perfect example of this elevation to perfect knowledge about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's described in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, later by Shukadeva Goswami, Itam satam brahma sukhanu bhutya dasyam gatanam paradaivatena mayashitanam nardarakena sakamvrijaru krita punya punjaha. Some people are realizing God as impersonal Brahman. He has this effulgence. Yasya prabha prabhabato jagadanda koti kotishva shesha vasudati vibhuti binam tad brahmanishkalamanantam ashesha bhutam govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. All light comes originally from the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Also in the Upanishads, hiranmayena patrena satyasya pihitam mukham tattvam pushana pavrenu satyadharmaya drishtaye. That the fact the devotee knows that beyond the effulgence is the personality of Godhead, the face, and therefore he says, "Oh my Lord, please remove your dazzling effulgence so that I can see your form of bliss." He's hankering to enter into that personal relationship. But some who adopt the process of Gyan Yoga, they negate the material world through mental speculation, and they can come all the way to the point of realizing the impersonal light which emanates from the body of the Lord, but no further. Therefore it is said, Itam satam brahma sukhanu bhutya. They realize this impersonal, all-pervading aspect of the Lord. And then there are others, dasyam gatanam paradaivatena. They've realized the Lord in his majestic aspect as Narayan and Vaikuntha, where the devotees are eternally engaged in the mode of service, reverent service. They see the opulence of the Lord, and they relish serving Him in a very solemn way, offering prayers and all kinds of kingly service to the Lord in opulence. Mayashritanam naradarakena means then there are others who think that the Lord doesn't exist. They don't see that there is a God because they're simply absorbed in the material energy, which is separated energy of the Lord, and they're overwhelmed by it. And therefore, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Naham prakashya sarvasya yoga maya samavrita mudoyam nabijananti lokamamajam avyayam. That for these people, my form and my existence is completely covered over. However, there are others, sakamvrija rukrita punya punjaha, who have come to the point of realizing the personality behind everything. There is a supreme personality, there is a supreme intelligence, an origin, a divine source to everything, and it's a person. And he's an all-blissful personality with the qualities of Satchidananda, eternity, knowledge, and bliss, but vigraha and form. And the spiritual world is full of variety as well, and full of loving exchanges between the devotees. And these devotees, Shukadeva Goswami says, are engaged in loving relationships with the Supreme Personality of Godhead eternally. Some of them in intimate relationships like friends. Like a friend plays with a friend, and young boys, sometimes they wrestle out of friendship, and one wrestles the other one to the ground and says, "You're not such a big man after all." So the friends of Krishna wrestle him to the ground and say, "Who do you think you are? Look, we just beat you," and so forth. That's intimate friendship. And as mentioned by Sri Chaitanya, by the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami, says that this kind of intimate exchange with God is most appreciated by him. That is, the irreverent prayers, even of his girlfriends in Goloka Vrindavan, who sometimes chastise him when he comes to visit. They'll say, "Sorry, he's not home. He doesn't want to talk to you anyway." And he, according to Kaviraj Goswami, relishes these interactions more than the reverent hymns of the Vedas offered by Brahmins who are engaged in ritualistic sacrifices. Purusha Sukta, Sahasrashir Purujaha Sahasraksa Sahasrabat Sabhuming Vishadovritvat Atitishtat Shangulam. And these very reverent ways of approaching the Lord are not so tasty, but that realm exists. Hitam satam brahmasukhanubhutya dasyam gatanam paradayvatena mayashritanam naradarakena sakamvrijaru krita punya punjaha. Those who are extremely fortunate, they've developed this loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they're playing with Him as friends in the spiritual world. This was noted by one of the hearers of Srimad Bhagavatam, who is the mother of Parikshit Maharaj, who happened to be present when Shukadeva Goswami spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam. And although she didn't hear everything, after he had finished speaking, she had the benefit of being his mother, and therefore she approached him before he died and said, "Please tell me the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam." And the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam is rasa. It means relationship with the eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Uttara, the mother of Parikshit Maharaj, surmised that because there is this kind of relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead that's unheard of in this world and unheard of in Vaikuntha, there must be another place that accommodates those very fortunate souls which are described in the Srimad Bhagavatam by Shukadeva Goswami, that they're the most fortunate of all. And therefore, Parikshit Maharaj, understanding that his mother was very intelligent, began to describe what is the topmost position in all of creation. Goloka namni nijadamni tale chatasya devi mahesha harinam suteshu teshu te te prabhava nichaya vihitashta yena govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Above Devi Dham, where we're living now, home of Walmart, McDonald's, IRS. Sorry, I didn't mean to ruin our days. There's, above that is the abode of Lord Shiva, which is an interim point. And above that is Haridam, the abode of Lord Narayan. Above that even is Goloka. That's called the Nijadam. The Nijadam means the personal abode of Krishna. That's his place where he's in fully himself. He fully manifests all his qualities because he's there with his most loving associates in the spiritual world. So that is the subject of the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And Shukadev Goswami, as I said, had gone through an evolution because he was a completely self-realized soul. Averse to the variety of the material world, which is a characteristic of one who is self-realized. That is, one who understands the trap of material energy, that if one contemplates the objects of the senses here in the material world, one develops an attachment for them, and by that attachment, then one gradually becomes degraded. And therefore, he was reluctant to even look at the material energy, and he didn't want to come out of the womb. And he stayed there for 16 years. And after he came out, he wanted nothing to do with family life. And most people have to go through the arduous process of growing up, going to kindergarten. I hated it. I hated school all the way through. Kicking and screaming, I always asked, why do I have to do this? What is the use? And in high school, I finally said, that's enough. I quit. I'm not doing this anymore. And so he didn't want to go through any of it. And as soon as he came out of the womb, he took off running. This is the Yam pravajantam anupetam apeta kritam dvaipayano virakartara ajuhava putreti tan mataya taya taravo buni dus tam sarva bhuta hridayam munim anatosmi. That even though his exalted father, the incarnation of God, Vyasadeva called after him and said, oh, my son, please come back, at least take the sacred thread. And boys are supposed to take the sacred thread at how old? 10 years old in Vedic culture or something. They go through this upanayanam. Their father gives them a thread and so forth. And he said, no thanks. I didn't want that. I don't want any of the trappings of the varnashram. I don't want anything to do with family life. He didn't stop to talk to his mom or his dad or anything. He just took off and went to the forest, because that's where self-realized yogis go, to the forest, where they can be alone. Actually, it's nice to be alone, isn't it? The devotees spend time alone. If you associate with other devotees, then it's considered you're alone, because you're not tempted to speak nonsense. You're only obligated in the association of devotees to speak about Krishna. If you just insist on speaking about Krishna, devotees won't argue with you. They'll say, oh, very nice, let's do that, instead of talking about anything else. But those who are self-realized and beyond the material world, who have not come to the position of devotional service, they like to live alone. So he went to the forest and was engaged in full absorption. He was fully absorbed, that is to say, in this detached state, and absorbed in the light of the Supreme. And his father, who had superior knowledge, Srila Vyasadeva, had, through the mercy of his spiritual master, Narada Muni, attained this most high knowledge about the variety of the spiritual world and of the personality of Godhead. And therefore, he sent out disciples into the woods, according to the Shastra, to recite various verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam. including one very famous verse, Aho Bhakiyam Stanakalakutam, which is about how, in one of Krishna's pastimes when he was a little baby. He was just a brand new baby, completely helpless apparently, according to his family. But then Kamsa was sending demons to kill him. And one of the demons was named Putana. And Putana was a witch, but she disguised herself as a beautiful nursemaid. And she walked into the house and everyone was bewildered by her beauty. And they all said, okay, go ahead, you can see the baby. And she had a dastardly plan to kill him by smearing her breast with poison. So when she picked up little baby Krishna, she put her nipple into his mouth, and she had put this horrible poison which kills one immediately. And Krishna, of course, can't be killed by such petty things, or anything for that matter. He took the poison, sucked out the milk, sucked out her life air, and she died. And then she reassumed her gigantic demoness form, which is, by the way, 80 miles long. And by the way, she collapsed and she fell onto only one area in the Vraj, which was the selected orchards of Kamsa himself. He had carefully nurtured these trees for his own enjoyment, and she crushed all of the trees and left everything else untouched by Krishna's arrangement. And then he was just crawling on her breast, and then along came his parents and everyone else, and were aghast that my little child is, on this gigantic demoness. And they rescued the child, and they purified him by sprinkling the dust from that was raised by the hoofs of the calves, and they took other cow products and they smeared his body and so forth to purify him and save him from any kind of danger. And then they cut up the body of Putana into hunks, and they burned it in a huge fire. And normally this would be, it sounds a little ghastly, but in this case, the scent coming from the fire was practically so aromatic, it was intoxicating to the whole village because her body had become purified. It is in the Sri Upanishad, Saparya Gach Chukram Akayam Avranam Asnaviram Shrudham Apapa Vidham, that Krishna, he's so purifying that even if the most impure person or element comes in contact with him, then he purifies it. And he's never touched by it himself. So her body had become purified. And that's true for anyone who chants Hare Krishna as well. Anyone who could say Hare Krishna? Then the Shastra says, Aho Batashwa Pachato Gariyanya Jiva Grevartate Namatubhyam Te Pustapaste Juhuvusasna Arya Brahmana Churnama Grananti Ete. How wonderful it is. Devahuti says that the person who says Hare Krishna, their body is transformed. No longer are they sinful, because it's assumed that if you can say Hare Krishna, you've already performed all kinds of Vedic sacrifices in previous life. You've come to the pinnacle. Just like if you see a high court judge sitting behind the bench giving out sentences, you can assume he went to law school. So similarly, say the acharyas, if you see someone chanting Hare Krishna, you can assume that they've been through the whole progression of spiritual life. They've come to the perfection of spiritual life by that. And anyone who is chanting Hare Krishna is purified by the touch of the holy name, which literally dances on one's tongue. And Prabhupada says that just as Lord Nrsimhadev placed his hand on the head of Prahlad Maharaj, there's no difference when we chant Hare Krishna, because we're being touched by Krishna through the holy name. So Putana was completely cleansed by that touch of Krishna. And now, what was her destination after being killed? She attained vimukti, not just mukti, but vimukti. Vimukti means a very special kind of liberation where she got she was revived. Her eternal relationship with Krishna was manifest from that incident. And she ended up in a kind of vatsalya ras, a parental type of relationship with the Supreme Lord eternally, in a situation just near Goloka Vrindavan. in a very powerful way. Then, therefore, Uddhava remarks, Aho Bhakiyam Stana Kalakutam, how wonderful it is that although Putana had this idea to kill Krishna, and she actually tried to carry it out, because she touched him, and because she came in contact with him, and she did it in such a way that although she was trying to kill him, she offered her breast. Krishna accepted one part, and that is she offered her breast, so she's a mother. And the part about the poison, he just sort of overlooked it. The part about being sent by Kamsa to kill Krishna, that's nothing. So Uddhava says, who would take shelter of anyone else more, and who's more merciful than Krishna, who saved Putana and liberated her to the highest position, even though she tried to kill him. And when Shukadeva Goswami, who is absorbed in self-realization beyond the material world, heard this verse and others, he became so attracted that he came back to meet his father for the purpose of learning the Srimad Bhagavatam. And there he studied intensely all the verses, 18,000 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he's the perfect person to take in the Srimad Bhagavatam, as we hear later, Nivrtitarsha Rupagiyamana Bhavaushadach Chotramano Biramat Kautama Shloka Gunana Varda Puman Virajeta Vinam Pashugnat. That is, that the candidate for taking full advantage of the Srimad Bhagavatam is one who is Nivrita Trishna. Trishna means thirst. In the material world, everyone has a thirst for something. I was once staying on the roof of a very tall hotel. Well, not that tall these days, but back in those days it was tall, in Jagannath Puri. They've built too many things there now. But it was a fairly simple place, but I was living on the roof. I got a little place on the roof of this hotel so I could look out and see the temple every morning. And one day I was sitting in the 104-degree weather at about 6 a.m., looking over the edge of the roof, and I was watching how every living entity was trying to taste something. The crows were flying around, and there was cows down below rummaging through something, the dogs running free trying to eat something. All the humans were, licking, eating, doing something, and little bugs everywhere. I looked around me and suddenly had this overwhelming feeling how everyone had this thirst for something, something to touch the tongue, some contact. And this is characteristic of the material world. All the living beings have these tongues, and they have a way of tasting something. And they all have, according to their conditioning, a certain thing they want to taste. And they can't do without it. And they're looking everywhere to get more of it. Like ants. If you tell an ant that there's a grain of sugar at the top of a skyscraper building, a couple minutes later, he and all his friends will be up there. Because they want it. They have a taste for it. It's intoxication. And so, Nivrtitarsha, one who is beyond this thirst for things here in the material world, is then qualified to peacefully and ardently hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, because they have nothing left in this material world for them. They realize the futility of it all, and they've lost their taste for the material things. They're not distracted anymore. They're not interested in style even, and this is apparent from Shukadeva Goswami, who was walking naked. Everyone has to think a long time about what they're going to wear. I notice this especially, I go shopping once a year. And I go right to the place, I go two places, and I go as quick as I can, because at Ganga Prasad is where I buy my cloth. And they say, "You want something else? You want sari?" I was like, "No, sorry. My wife can buy sari if she wants, but, But they try to, "You want this? How about that?" I try to get it because they have power in their mantras. Because just as yogis are fixed on the super soul, at such intensity, they're fixed on the rupee, and they're empowered so much that the sound of their voice, "You want sari?" And then next thing, it's like, "Okay, I'll take 6 of them, and then 4 different colors like that." And so I try to go in and out as fast as I can and drop it off at the tailor. He knows what I want, and then it'll go away. But I notice that this thing, there's all these colors, and, it's like, you don't want the collar like this? This, that? I say, no, keep it the same. Steve Jobs knew about this. That's why he always wore black turtleneck and blue jeans and tennis shoes, I believe, every day, because it's a major distraction to think about, like, what am I wearing now? You just wear the same thing. Shukadeva Goswami, he didn't wear anything. This is symbolic. Lord Shiva, he doesn't wear anything either. He just wears ashes on his body. It's very indicative of the state of consciousness that I'm not interested in even covering my body. And Shukadeva Goswami had no interest whatsoever in the material world at all. This is represented by his complete neglect of any style or even covering his body in any way. But he was fully absorbed and had a taste for something much higher. And therefore Bhagavatam says, Atmaramas chamunayo nigranta apyuru krame. Bhakti mahaitukim, itam bhuta guno hari. Third line is? Kurvanti haitukim bhaktim itam bhuta guno hari. Thank you. Means that even the Atmaramas, those who are beyond the attraction of material style, they're not connected through the ego to the material body and how to interact with the material world in a way that their image will be enhanced or anything like that. They have nothing to do with the material world anymore. Still, they're attracted to the sound vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because itam bhuta guno hari. It's the same quality as Hari, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's full of all tastes. All rasa is there in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One sadhu, when Prabhupada's godbrothers in Vrindavan a long time ago, he told me, he only chanted all day long, and he used to fast. And some devotees would ask him, how are you going to live? And he said, all vitamins are there in the holy name. And those who are absorbed like this, they actually live in a different plane. So that was Shukadeva Goswami. And now, why was he even walking around? Because you might say that what is the purpose of walking anywhere? There's a question that comes up in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter when Arjuna asks Krishna, what is astita prajna? How does he walk? How does he sit? What is his language? And so forth. And for astita prajna, sometimes people say stillness. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Nothing more to do, just shanti, peace. But actually there's a higher level which is described that now Shukadeva Goswami, he was walking, he was moving in the world, but karunaya, out of a sense of mercy. He had now an overflow of this nectar that he was getting, that he had gotten from his father from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he only wanted to distribute it. And that is the prerogative of the Mahatma. Mahatmanastu mam parta daivim prakriti mashita, bhajantyananya manaso gyatva bhutidam avyayam. This means those who are Maha-Atmas, they are not crippled by having a vested interest in the material world. This is what cripples us here in the material world. I have a vested interest. I want something out of it for myself. And therefore, I can't be a complete giver because I'm on the take. I'm actually taking from others. I'm exploiting the environment, either subtly or grossly. I want something. Fame, adoration, distinction. I want some profit for myself, and therefore I'm attached. And I become afraid because I have something to lose. But the Mahatmas, they are such great souls. They've connected themselves with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in loving service. And therefore they have no other interest anymore in the material world except for pleasing the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so they have no more vested interest in the material world. Even when Lord Nrsimhadev appeared, we see that the demigods, they were afraid when he was fighting with Hiranyakashipu, because they have their posts, they have their interest and their opulence in the higher planetary systems, and they were thinking, I hope he wins, because if he doesn't, we're out of a job. And they were already out of a job because of Hiranyakashipu, who had taken over everything and had made everyone subservient. And now when they were fighting, even at one time, Lord Nrsimhadev let Hiranyakashipu slip from his hand as they were fighting, and they all gasped. That's the gasp of the material world, that, oh no, now what's going to happen to me? This is bhayam dvitiya binibeshita syad, because when one loses vision that everything is being controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and there's nothing separate from Him, every incident that occurs in our life comes from His mercy, then and because I have a vested interest, I become afraid in the material world. But those who are Mahatmas tu mamparta daivim prakritim ashrita, they've taken shelter in a different place. Ashrita, their shelter, it doesn't come from ice cream or eating or money or anything. There's so many shelters in this world. Everyone takes shelter somewhere. Many people take shelter in money, because they think, if I have enough money, then I'll be okay. This is mentioned in the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. People are thinking they have many ways of protecting themselves. Atma sainyesu satsapi, they're described as fallible soldiers. They'll fight for me, they'll protect me. I have, what's that thing called on the internet? You can protect your identity from identity theft. LifeLock. LifeLock, but you don't want LifeLock 1 or 2. You have to have Premier. That costs you like $395 a year. You protect that, and then you're going to need some insurance. Try getting earthquake insurance in California. Good luck. But you can buy the most you can, and then you need life insurance. You need car insurance. I love thinking about insurance. Health insurance. Under Obamacare, you might get a discount if you're lucky. You go through all these kinds of insurance, and you'll end up spending at least half of your gross income on just protecting yourself in the material world. It's a fact. And so we have all these ways. The Bhagavatam says, Deha patra kalatradeshu asaini sosatsapi, all these ways to protect myself in the material world. But the Mahatmas, they don't take protection from anywhere else except for Krishna. This is their meditation, that He's my only protector and my only maintainer and so forth. So Mahatmanas tu mamparta daivim prakritim ashritaha. They're under this divine protection. They don't have a care for themselves. They're only engaged in service. Whatever Krishna decides to do with me, that's His prerogative. Whatever He likes, fine. That was Shukadeva Goswami. Fully absorbed like that and only wandering the countryside, a lot of curious people following him. Like villagers, they would fall behind him and sort of make fun of him. Why is he naked? Who is this kid walking through? But when Shukadeva Goswami came to the assembly of sages who understand physiognomy, they can. It takes one to know one. When somebody meets a great soul, they immediately can tell by how he speaks, how he or she conducts herself or himself in service and so forth. That's why Arjuna, again, wanted to know, how does that person speak? How does he move? How does he sit? And so forth. He wanted to know, what do these people look like? So those who are on that level, they're cultivating, they're divesting themselves in the material world. Everyone wants to invest here in the material world, but the great souls, they're divesting. Chaitanya Maharaj once told me he was going to start a business to help everyone divest. Everyone's trying to invest. He said, I think I'll start something to show you how to divest. Get rid of all your stuff. He doesn't have any stuff. Everything he has is like, unless somebody gives him something new, he just wears it out, This is sannyasi. Somebody just uses everything for Krishna and whatever he needs in his service. Simple, simple life, very simple existence and everything for Krishna. And no anxieties. Just a place to lie down, a little prasadam and service, that's all. So Shukadeva Goswami, wandering the countryside, then came into the assembly of sages, and they saw him, and they recognized that this is the representative of the Supreme Personality of God, and he's got something. Everyone wants this thing, actually, in the material world. That's why we emphasize that the devotees here that go out for spreading Krishna consciousness, the power of that is sadhana. The power of that is the chanting of Hare Krishna. Once one has a glimpse that there's something in the holy name that's not ordinary, once one feels lifted by that power of chanting Hare Krishna and reading Srimad Bhagavatam, one has something so super excellent that no one else can get because they're looking in the wrong place and they're using the wrong method to find it, then people see it in the eyes of the devotees. The devotee knocks on the door, and they open the door, and they're just about to say no, and then they see something, and they say, okay, what do you have? We want to know what you have. And they invite the devotees in, which is always a big mistake, and next thing you know, wife comes home and says, what'd you buy? Full set of Bhagavatams, where are we going to put it? You're going to have to move all that other junk out of the way. That's how spiritual life begins. Sadhus move in, and they move all their spiritual energy in, and then everything else has to go out. I was telling someone the other day, for grihastas, the fastest way to advance in spiritual life, if you want the fast track, is to invite sadhus into your house. Not just for an afternoon, but let them live there for a little while. Because then you have to change all your habits. And all the stuff that was lying around before the sadhu comes over, you go like, I don't think he wants to see that. Let's get rid of this. What if he sees that? Let's get rid of that. And then you're forced. And Prabhupada used to give the example like a glass of ink. If you pour in enough milk, then all the ink goes out. So similarly, we should invite sadhus into our life and be pranipat, be willing to let whatever attachments, let them out. Just say, please, clean. You do the surgery. I'm here for surgery. You cut out whatever my anarthas are. In fact, please chastise me. This is the greatest benediction. If you can get a sadhu to chastise you, because sadhus don't chastise people who can't take it. They look at somebody and they think, this person can't take it. If I chastise him, he'll just go away. But if you come pranipat, means you come in a submissive mood that I'm ready for anything. You pound on me and you beat it out of me. Then you come like that, and the sadhu can see this person's ready, and then he'll pound you with his danda or with his words and chastise, and then it's like, okay, now I'm free from that anartha. It's the easy way. This is the power of association with these sadhus. So all these devotees that were gathered with Maharaj Parikshit, who was fully ready for this change in life, this transformation from this life to the next life, which is the biggest topic in the material world that everyone avoids. A book I read recently by a psychologist called Denial of Death. And it's all about how there are hundreds of psychological devices that human beings use just to forget about death. And that's why everyone's doing all kinds of crazy things. They're building football stadiums right nearby here for billions of dollars, so a bunch of grown men can run around and crash into each other. And it's a big thing. It's like it represents this big distraction from the fact that I have to die in this material world. And the sages saw Shukadeva Goswami, and they recognized right away his greatness, and they stood up out of respect for him. And then they offered him a seat of esteem. They said, please, you sit on this seat. And Shukadeva Goswami sat and spoke to Parikshit Maharaj. Now, Parikshit Maharaj had good questions. And I was thinking about this the other day. Why is it so hard to ask questions? If you go to an audience that's moderately interested in spiritual life, moderately interested, they're there out of duty or politeness or something like that. They're not intensely practicing themselves. And you say, do you have any questions? They'll either have no questions, or they'll have some questions that are really off topic. They won't be very penetrating questions or very vital questions. And sometimes they're even what we call absurd inquiries. Prabhupada calls absurd inquiries. Like one time somebody asked Prabhupada, he said, do you have any questions? This was in Japan. And somebody was like, what do I ask him? He said, have you ever met Indra? And Prabhupada said, what difference does it make to you if I've met him or I haven't met him? First of all, if I said yes, you wouldn't know if I did or not. So how would you verify that I met Indra or I didn't meet Indra? And then Trivikram Maharaj was there, and he said, it would be a benefit if Indra met him. But Prabhupada said, these kinds of questions are not so important. And unless one is digging deep every day into one's sadhana, turning over these anarthas and looking, how can I spot offenses within my own heart and eliminate them, and living like this from moment to moment, saying, how can I improve my service, then these questions, these vital questions, don't come out. They're just not there. I actually don't want to know. I'm not interested in the answer. So, but Parikshit Maharaj wasn't like that. He was the perfect audience, and Shukadeva Goswami was the perfect speaker. That's what Srimad Bhagavatam is. And that's what happens, that when these two come together, there's potency in these two things. There has to be both, because if the speaker comes and no one wants to listen, the speaker doesn't speak. He just doesn't say anything. Therefore, it's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and Prabhupada gives the summary in the 10th canto called The Light of the Bhagavat, that sometimes the acharyas, just like waterfalls, come out seasonally. They pour out all kinds of water at certain times and flood the land. And other times, they're silent, they don't move. And so, similarly, sometimes the acharyas, they speak, and other times they remain silent. Other times, they come out and they do a wide campaign and they spread everything. And when the time is right, the circumstances are perfect. That is, the inquirer is completely ready and sincere and open, and the speaker is fully qualified. Then what you get is Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's what happened, this perfect circumstance. And Shukadeva Goswami, the perfected soul, then spoke to the most sincere inquirer, who had no more vested interest in the material world. He abandoned it. And this is possible for everyone. Some people don't give up even at the time of death. It's very difficult. We can see, being with people who are leaving, you can hold their hand and everything, and it's like, I don't want to go. And the questions that come up oftentimes at the time of death are, what about my son? What about my daughter? How are they going to do without me? And so forth. Bhagavatam says, before you come to this point, you should die to live. Don't remain attached to these things up until the point of death. Die to live. Don't let those be your last inquiries in this world. How is my bank account going to be taken care of, and so forth. You should be fully detached by that time. And you can do it at any time. No one's forcing you. No one's forcing me to be attached to the material world. I'm just attached to the material world. And the Shastra is saying, become attached to something higher, and inviting us to go to that higher realm at any time. Yanti deva vrata devan pitrin yanti pratir vrata bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti mam yajinopi mam. Krishna says, you can go where you like, fly away at any time, you're free. The cage is open in the human form of life. Sometimes the little bird, you open the cage, he hops out a few feet and then he hops back in. And he's like, fly away. And so I can't do it. This is unfortunate. So now the scene is set at the end of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Shukadeva Goswami has taken his seat of esteem, and then the questions begin. The invocation is there, indicating that there's no other topic here in this assembly except for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the words are uttered, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This is the target, to discover the Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead, the all-pervading Lord who's within everyone's heart and everywhere. And then then Shukadeva Goswami says, Varyan Eshate Prashna. He said, your question, your prashna is Varyan. It's glorious. It's the most glorious thing that anybody could ask. Because by asking this question, everybody's benefited. And we can refer to the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in which Shukadeva Goswami says that when somebody is speaking about Krishna, then three people are benefited. One is the speaker, the other is the listener, and the third is everybody else in between who gets touched by that katha. So he said, your question is the most glorious, because by asking these questions, you'll purify everybody. Me, you, and everybody else in between. And then he says that in human society, there are millions and millions of inquiries about all kinds of things. But they're all superfluous to our real goal in life. But you've asked the perfect question. What do I do at the time of death? What should I think of at the time of death? What should I speak about? What should I hear about now that I'm leaving this world? And then, in summary, Shukadeva Goswami says, Ante Narayana Smritihi, at this most important juncture, you should fix your mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is where how we're entering into the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that Shukadeva Goswami now begins to speak. This is a momentous occasion, that the stage is set, and they've come together by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's just about to speak. And now I'm going to read one of Prabhupada's purports at the beginning of this chapter 2. Chapter 1 of the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll just read the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O my Lord, the all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport, Vasudevaya means to Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Since by chanting the name of Krishna Vasudeva, one can achieve all the good results of charity, austerity, and penances, it is to be understood that by the chanting of this mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, the author or speaker or any one of the readers of Srimad Bhagavatam is offering respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord Krishna, the reservoir of all pleasure. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the principles of creation are described, and thus the first canto may be called creation. Similarly, in the second canto, the post-creation cosmic manifestation is described. The different planetary systems are described in the second canto as different parts of the universal body of the Lord. For this reason, the second canto may be called the cosmic manifestation. There are 10 chapters in the second canto, and in these 10 chapters, the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam and the different symptoms of this purpose are narrated. The first chapter describes the glories of chanting, and it hints at the process by which the neophyte devotees may perform meditation on the universal form of the Lord. In the first verse, Shukadeva Goswami replies to the questions of Maharaj Parikshit, who asked him about one's duties at the point of death. Maharaj Parikshit was glad to receive Shukadeva Goswami, and he was proud of being a descendant of Arjuna, the intimate friend of Krishna. Personally, he was very humble and meek, but he expressed his gladness that Lord Krishna was very kind to his grandfathers, the sons of Pandu, especially his own grandfather Arjuna. And because Lord Krishna was always pleased with Maharaj Parikshit's family, at the verge of Maharaj Parikshit's death, Shukadeva Goswami was sent to help him in the process of self-realization. Maharaj Parikshit was a devotee of Lord Krishna from his childhood, so he had natural affection for Krishna. Shukadeva Goswami could understand his devotion. Therefore, he welcomed the questions about the king's duty. Because the king hinted that worship of Lord Krishna is the ultimate function of every living entity, Shukadeva Goswami welcomed the suggestion and said, because you have raised questions about Krishna, your question is most glorious. The translation of the first verse is as follows. Shri Shuka Uvacha Variyan Neshate Prashna. Sorry, I thought you were there. Variyan Eshate Prashna Krito Loka Hitam Nrapa Atmavit Samata Pungsam Shotavyadishuya Paraha. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, my dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial to all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing and it is approved by all transcendentalists. Purport: even the very question is so nice that it is the best subject matter for hearing. Simply by such questioning and hearing, one can achieve the highest perfectional stage of life. Because Lord Krishna is the original Supreme Person, any question about him is original and perfect. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that the highest perfection of life is to achieve the transcendental loving service of Krishna. Because questions and answers about Krishna elevate one to that transcendental position, the questions of Maharaj Parikshit about Krishna philosophy are greatly glorified. Maharaj Parikshit wanted to absorb his mind completely in Krishna, and such absorption can be effected simply by hearing about the uncommon activities of Krishna. For instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that simply by understanding the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna's appearance, disappearance, and activities, one can immediately return home back to Godhead and never come back to this miserable condition of material existence. It is very auspicious, therefore, to hear about Krishna always. So Maharaj Parikshit requested Shukadeva Goswami to narrate the activities of Krishna so that he could engage his mind in Krishna. The activities of Krishna are non-different from Krishna himself. As long as one is engaged in hearing such transcendental activities of Krishna, he remains aloof from the conditional life of material existence. I'll read that again because it's such a nice sentence. As long as one is engaged in hearing such transcendental activities of Krishna, he remains aloof from the conditional life of material existence. Yeah, as long as one is engaged. Because, for instance, when you turn on the light in a dark room, the darkness flees. But how far away is it really? Is that darkness? It can come right back in a second as soon as you let the light go down. So similarly, Maya is always there. And the moment that I stop the vibration, then, especially in this Devi Dham, the material sound vibration will enter back into my ears, and I'll be affected by it. So the technique of spiritual life recommended by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is to continuously hear and chant about Krishna. And for those who find that unreasonable, the acharyas say that the Shastras aren't recommending anything unreasonable. They're not saying that you should 24 hours a day engage in hearing and chanting about Krishna. Although that's not a bad idea, because you can't do it. She was saying, why not? And they say, because you can't do it. And if the Shastra tells you, hear and chant about Krishna 24 hours a day, and you can't do it, then you'll start to neglect the Shastra, you'll think, oh, it's impractical, maybe it's not even true, it's unreasonable, and so forth. And therefore, Rupa Goswami says, this means that at least every day, you should do your basic sadhana. You should have a regulated system of hearing about Krishna every day. Otherwise, you'll be affected. As I like to bring the example of the famous violinist from Russia who said that if I don't practice one day, then I notice it. And if I don't practice 2 days, then my teacher notices it. And if I don't practice for 3 days, then everybody notices it. That's with violin, because it's a very subtle instrument to get a note. Dimitri, you play violin? You know anybody who does? Yes, you do. Acharya, yeah. Anyway, I've noticed a lot of people in Russia play the violin. It's very, the arts there are very augmented. So, similarly, when we practice daily, we'll notice the difference in our own life. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitai tan brahma bhuyaya kalpate means that if you continuously engage in seva, especially Shravanam Kirtanam, without a break, that means every day at least, cover your basics, then you'll rise above the three modes of material nature and come to the level of Brahman. And naturally, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, Dhanayashuvayaragyam Jnanam Chayara Haitukam, knowledge and detachment comes to one who is engaged in the direct process of bhakti as concomitant factors. You don't have to search for them independently. You don't even have to restrain yourself. If you engage in the positive system of hearing and chanting about Krishna, naturally you'll develop these fortifying elements, knowledge and detachment from the world, so that you can go on with your practice of devotional service. You'll become aloof from the material world. And I'll say it one more time. As long as one is engaged in hearing such transcendental activities of Krishna, he remains aloof from the conditional life of material existence. One of the best words in the English language, aloof. If you ever have any problems and your mind is in anxiety, try just probably being aloof for a while. Someone asked me that a long time ago. Actually, it was right before I started getting connected with ISV, because I lived in a house up in Burlingame, which I still live in. And the devotees came up there and they said, don't you want to be involved, or you're kind of aloof, right? And I was thinking, yeah, I'm kind of aloof. It's good to remain aloof from some things. Other things you want to be attached to. You got to know what to be attached to and what to be aloof from. But we should definitely be aloof from the concocted ideas in the mind and the taste, the various tastes that our senses have for material sense enjoyment. And we can only do that if we have a higher taste. In fact, in commentary on the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in which Krishna describes how one must conquer the lower self by the higher self, the Acharya Baladev Bijabhusan says, the only way to conquer lust is by rasa. He says, lust, kama, is conquered by rasa, only. And then he quotes the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, and he says that rasavarjam rasopyasya, param drishva nivardite, only when you've tasted something higher, which is rasa. It's some relationship with the Supreme. You've gotten some reciprocation from your chanting of Hare Krishna and your performance of service. You're feeling that relationship with the Lord and His transcendental sound vibration. Then you can give up lust, which is the all-devouring enemy of the living entity in this material world. Otherwise, no possibility. Shraddha. We're going to hear the origin of the word aloof.
It's very interesting. It is from medieval English. Aloof is a weather gauge and also a windward direction.
Aloof is a weather gauge and also a windward direction.
It's originally a nautical order to keep the ship's head to the wind.
Keep the ship's head to the wind.
How appropriate it is for us to stay aloof then, so that our ship stays in the direction of Krishna.
Keep the ship going in the direction of Krishna. We should go in Krishna's direction. It's a nautical expression, aloof. Keep going? You want to hear the rest of the purport? Okay. The topics of Lord Krishna are so auspicious that they purify the speaker, the hearer, and the inquirer. They are compared to the Ganges waters which flow from the toe of Lord Krishna. Wherever the Ganges waters go, they purify the land and the person who bathes in them. Similarly, Krishna Katha, or topics of Krishna, are so pure that wherever they are spoken, the place, the hearer, the inquirer, the speaker, and all concerned become purified. Krishna Katha, Katha. I have a friend, a godbrother, who likes to hear and chant a lot. He pronounces certain Sanskrit words in different ways. And he's talking Krishna Katha. Whenever he says it, it always sounds like a beverage to me. I was thinking, wow, he's drinking that beverage. You know, it's like, you should have some Krishna Katha. Like it's a drink. It is described in other places like a drink. You have to drink it. In other places described as a medicine. It's medicinal. But one has to have the intelligence to take it on a regular basis. It's the cure for material life. And once one's cured from material life, one's saved. Even if living in this material world, brahmanyadaya karmani sangam tyakva karotiya, lipyatena sapapena padma patram ivambasa. I was giving a talk in Japan, and one of my favorite places to go anywhere is at the Botanical Gardens in Osaka, Japan. And the best time of year is around June because that's when all the lotus flowers bloom. And the Japanese are avid gardeners. And the botanical gardens you can imagine. So they have about 100 lotus ponds all in a row. And during June, they all come out and bloom. So I asked the audience, I told them their homework was to go and visit the botanical garden and just sit there for a couple hours and observe the lotus flowers in June when they come out, because as Krishna says in this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, that although they grow out of the mud and they're sitting right in the water, they never actually touch it. And how is that so? You have to see it for yourself. And then he said, you should be like that. He said, if you don't, if you give up the fruits of your work, you don't have a vested interest in this material world, then you're never touched by sin. Just the way the lotus flower is never touched by water or mud, even though it grows right in them. So in a similar way, those who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly also remain in this state of, although working in the material world, not being affected by it. That's the great benefit of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Let's see if there's any reflections or questions. We have a text. Yes, and we welcome everyone who's joined us on the internet today. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. And if you have questions or a comment, you can text it in to 650-245-7018, and Shraddha is going to read us the text that's just come in.
So you were talking about Srimad Bhagavatam as a beverage, and I just wanted to let you know that somebody online is drinking the beverage. Hare Krishna, my parched ears are getting quenched. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for the lecture. This is our Pratibha Mataji from Sacramento.
Malini?
Prabhuji, you were talking about how junk is at home, and when Srimad Bhagavatam comes, the junk goes out. Yesterday when we were door to door in book distribution, we presented the Bhagavatam to a couple, and one of the inhibitions when he saw that there are 18 books, he was saying, you know, I'm worried about the amount of junk I already have in my house. You know? He said that I collect so much materially and I'm worried how to get rid of that junk. And then we said, you know, that's very easy. Just bring Bhagavatam in your house and then the junk will automatically disappear. And it's not just to say, but we explained that how when Bhagavatam comes in, you lose the taste for those junk kind of things, and then you naturally stop buying or start getting rid of it. And that actually helped them to decide to buy the Bhagavatam set.
That's really interesting because this indicates the importance of explaining the Bhagavatam to others and what the benefit is. Because people have objections and doubts. And the devotees who have conviction and realization can then meet with these people and present the Bhagavatam and say, you should take this, and you should also start your spiritual life and so forth. People may have many excuses. Might they have many excuses? Yes or yes? What might some of them be to engaging in spiritual life, or, for instance, keeping the Srimad Bhagavatam at home? Malini just gave one of them. I have a lot of junk already, so I can't take another thing in my house. They're thinking like that. I'm already overwhelmed with things. But then she convinced them, said, this is not an ordinary thing. Once this comes in your house, then all the superfluous things fly out the window. What other kinds of excuses do people have for not taking to spiritual life? No time. Prabhupada wrote about this in one of his early Back to Godhead magazines when he was personally writing, publishing, and distributing it. He said this is the chronic disease of modern man, which was no time. No time. Yes? Too early to begin, because I'll just wait till I get old and I don't have anything else to do And that's what old people do. They sit around and read the Bhagavad Gita and so forth, right?
I know that disease. I know that disease.
I know that. I know everything. I already know that.
I'm just waiting for the right time to come. Like I'm waiting for the right, everything to become favorable and then do it.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the favorable circumstance. I take the spiritual life. Okay. Yeah.
Hello. There is another excuse, is boring.
It's boring.
Yeah, it's very boring.
Yeah.
For my wife, I say hell.
I usually have,
Yes?
usually have people saying that I know everything, and when we actually stop and ask them that, I would like to know what could we stop them and ask, because many people that I have talked to about books, they say, oh, we already know about things, we just follow these at home, we have many books, we may not have ISKCON ones, but we have other books, so how do we...
Well, like Vijay, when he stops people, a lot of times people from India say that, because familiarity breeds contempt, and they have an idea that, oh, I already know all this. My mom used to read this to me when I was a kid. These are bedtime stories. What do I need this for, and so forth. Sometimes they say, I already know Bhagavad Gita. So he would always say, really? Okay, I'll test you. And if you pass the test, then you can go. Otherwise, you're going to have to buy the Gita. Is that okay? And a lot of times they're with their family or something, they're all going, yeah, come on, try to pass the test. He gave an easy test. He'd open the book to the picture of the various avatars. And he'd say, okay, name all the avatars. You can just point to them and name them all. And if you get them all right, then you can go. And I started doing that. It was a lot of fun. Because just be very specific. People say, oh, I already know all this. And you, really? What's it about? I'll give you a little quiz, and if you pass, I'll let you go. The devotees come with a conviction in their heart about and know that these are concoctions of the mind simply to be lazy, and to delay the inevitable, and so forth. And therefore, out of compassion, they help people to overcome these obstacles. And in various ways. I mean, it's not necessarily that we have to speak so much. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by silence, he convinced Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, practically. I mean, he just sat there for 7 days and 7 nights while Sarvabhauma said, it is like this, and it is like that. And Mahaprabhu, as a young sannyasi, sat there and he didn't say one word. So that's a preaching technique. And sometimes we experience this. You go into a home and somebody's saying, oh, I know everything, and they're saying this and that. And then Shraddha Devi Dasi and I were in this was I'm glad I had witness, because it was an amazing occurrence. We were there. Who else was with us? It was one other devotee, a young devotee, but I can't remember. Anyway, I have at least one very credible witness. And we were talking to an older man and his daughter, and he just went on and on and on and on about all the reasons that he didn't need the Bhagavad Gita or any other thing we had. And I just agreed with everything he said. I said, yeah, sure, yeah, right, sure. For 5 minutes he went on. And then I just agreed and listened. And then after about 5 minutes of saying that he couldn't take the book, that actually all we wanted was his money and everything like that, then he said, okay, I'll take it. And he gave a donation. Then he handed the book to his daughter and said, here, you read this. And they walked away, and we were just standing there. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he converted Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya by silence, and he converted Prakashananda Saraswati through humility, and by showing his effulgence. So this is another way to preach. You don't have to use so many words, but if you're very, very humble when you approach people, like Mahaprabhu, he went in to meet the Mayavad sannyasis, and he washed his feet, and then he sat down in that place where people wash their feet, instead of taking any kind of seat of esteem. He had no sense of entitlement whatsoever. Welcome, everybody. So nice to see you all here. Thank you for coming. Yeah, history repeats. This is King Satyavata, when he picked up a little minnow from the water. He said, please save me from the bigger fish. And he took him out, and then he put him in a little bowl to save him, because he was the king. And the next day he had filled up the whole bowl, said, put me in a bigger body of water. So he kept transferred to a tub, and then to a little pond, and then to a lake. And then he grew to 80 million yojanas long. And so when we execute Krishna consciousness, everything always expands by Krishna's arrangement. So through humility, through showing your effulgence, this is what convinced the Mayavadi sannyasis, through silence. And similarly, the Digvijay Pandit, who was very puffed up, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he dazzled him with some knowledge, but then ultimately it was his great humility that convinced the Digvijay Pandit that this was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he surrendered to him. So preaching is an art. There was another point? Yes.
I had another question, Prabhu.
Okay.
Prabhu, I was thinking that, personally for me, when we do japa, we read lots of books, we understand that the material world is temporary, and I understand the mind plays on us, all these things, but it's still so hard to give up certain material things. What is that effort that we need to do that we can really, try to renounce those, for Krishna? Because it's been conditioned for so many years, from lifetimes, but I know that they are not good, but still...
There's the same question that was asked by Devahuti to her son, Kapiladev. She said, it seems impossible for the spiritual being to become emancipated from the bodily conception of life. She said, in fact, I've been in the material world for so long that it seems to me I am my body and I am my thoughts and so forth. She said, it's hard to distinguish between myself and my body and all my attachments. And she said, it seems impossible, really, to become free from this. How can the soul ever be released from this conditioning? She asked Lord Kapiladev. And he answered that by hearing for a long time, hearing over a long period of time, and engaging in the activities of devotional service. But he especially emphasized this hearing, and then he said, for a long time. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary on the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, talking about how the holy name manifests in one's life, said it's just like when you grow a fruit tree. The tree has to grow up, and then it has to produce the fruit, and then the fruit has to grow and manifest and mature. In a similar way, as you go on practicing Krishna consciousness, the result, the fruit, will come in due course of time. You have to be patient and wait for it to come. And Kalakanta Prabhu told us in Mayapur a couple of years ago, he recalled a story from Charu, the inimitable Charu Das, who's the temple president of Utah, ISKCON, who's a brilliant scholar and speaker. If he wasn't the temple president of the Utah temple, I'm fully convinced that he would be a United States Senator or probably the President of the United States. His speaking power is so great. And actually, he has a natural talent for it, but when he first joined the temple in Australia, he's an American, but he happened to be an Australian when he joined the Hare Krishna movement, I think back in 1969 or 70. There was nobody else to give classes, so for 5 years in a row he gave Bhagavatam class for an hour a day. And that goes along, there's some book that came out recently, I can't remember what the name of it is, but the man claimed that to become perfect in anything, to become a master, you have to practice for 10,000 hours. So that comes out to about 8 or 9 years, about 8 years, I think, of 5 or 6 hours a day. And any of you probably practice something like that. You're a master by now. Whatever it's engineering or whatever else you do, cooking, some of you. And if that's the case, please let me know because we'll come visit. Anyway, I'll get back to the point. Chiru. So Chiru, when Prabhupada visited Australia temple, he had an opportunity, because there were not many devotees around, to ask him a question. And he said, Prabhupada, it seems very difficult to get a taste for the holy name. Seems like it takes a long time. How do we become free from the bodily concept of life? How long does it actually take for this process to work? And he said, Prabhupada hesitated for about a minute. And then he said, 40 years. And I was looking at Kalakanta giving the class there, and I think, yeah, he's been practicing about 40 years. Of course, he said, I've been practicing 40 years, but it didn't work on me. That's the humiliated devotee. But everyone else was looking at him thinking, boy, it's working on these devotees who have been very steady in the process of Krishna consciousness, staying in contact with the transcendental vibration over a long period of time. And there are life changes that one goes through, and as one continues to chant Hare Krishna and sacrifice one's life, then naturally Krishna descends into one's heart and mind and so forth.
Thank you.
In his own sweet time. We can't force him. We just have to humbly wait. Yes?
So when we are talking about time, would it be okay for one to think that, yeah, you are trying to go towards the path of spiritual life, but you may not attain it in this lifetime? It could take 2, 3, 4 lifetimes, but at least you start the process in this lifetime.
Sure. And actually, in the process of bhakti, unlike any other practice like jnana or karma, the goal, the sadhya, and the sadhana, the practice, are identical. In the sense that chanting Hare Krishna is the process, and when one comes to the goal, one continues to chant Hare Krishna. Only at different levels. So in the Nectar of Devotion, it's explained how there are 3 stages of devotional service. One is devotional service in practice, one is out of emotion or bhava, and then in prema or perfection and love for Krishna. And the sadhana or the practice is the same throughout all those. And the acharyas say that a mango, whether it's a green mango or a ripe mango, is a mango. So those who have taken to the process, they're mangoes, spiritual mangoes. And whether it takes 1 lifetime or 1,000,000 lifetimes, practically it's inconsequential, because the goal is such an exalted destination and so final. And after being in the material world since the time immemorial, to have reached the human form of life and then come in contact with the bona fide spiritual process and so forth, is such a rare occurrence. The Shastra gives the example that on the vast ocean, there's a board floating, a log, and it has a hole in it. And then a turtle deep in the ocean comes up for air at the exact same time that the log is floating by, and he just happens to stick his head up right through the hole. And he breathes the air. Those are the chances of coming to the human form of life and coming in contact with the bona fide spiritual process to take one back to home, back to Godhead. So, labvam sudurlavam idam bahusambhavante manusha martadama anityama pihadira. The Shastra says, how rare, so rare, so rare, so lucky you are to have attained the human form of life. And now, even in this short span, you can take full advantage of it. And for those who do, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, because Arjuna was a little worried, he said, what if I fail? Krishna said, there's no failing on this path, that you fail upwards, and that falling upwards, no matter what happens, you know, the progress that you make is permanent. One who endeavors for this is never overcome by evil, he said. And repeated in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Kavi Yogendra says that one who goes on this path of direct bhakti and never falls or trips, even if he runs with eyes closed. So, yes, Mukunda, who was an associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. At the time, Mahaprabhu was performing as Mahaprakash for 24 hours at the home of Srivas Pandit. He revealed his godhood, and he was giving benedictions to everyone and calling everyone to come here and take some benediction from me and so forth. Of course, all the devotees just said, I want pure devotional service and so forth. And then they said, why don't you call Mukunda? Because he was one of the associates of Lord Chaitanya, a great singer and so forth. And he said, no, he's an offender. He cohorts with all these other teachers who are teaching all kinds of other philosophy, and he sits there and listens. Therefore, he's contaminated. I won't call him. And Mukunda was in the room, but he was behind a veil, and he began to weep. And the devotees went to him and said, you know, Mahaprabhu's not going to call you. And he said, please ask him, you know, at what time he'll accept me back. And they asked Mahaprabhu, and he said, not for 1,000,000 births, because of his offenses. So they went back and told Mukunda, in 1,000,000 births, you'll be able to see Mahaprabhu again. And then Mukunda began dancing in ecstasy. He said, I will see, I will see, I will get. And then Mahaprabhu embraced him because of his attitude, his mood. So when we understand the rarity of just coming to the process of devotional service in the human form of life, practically we have reached the destination in a sense. It's just a matter of time. And even for those who change their mind, Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Instruction that even for those, the Lord will drag one even by force back home, back to Godhead. But it's better if we voluntarily try for it. So, as a matter of practice, we recommend that everyone keep the Srimad Bhagavatam in every room in their house. Wherever you have a room, put a Srimad Bhagavatam set. That's the best insurance you can buy, and cheaper than term life, whole life, mixed term and whole, all the other insurances put together. And read Srimad Bhagavatam every day. If you have it every room in the house, it's an arm's length. Get in the habit of sitting down with your family and read a little Bhagavatam. I was up visiting Nanda Sutta Prabhu and his family. He has 2 girls. They live up in Seattle, Washington. Such a great soul, Nanda Sutta Prabhu. He's a very, very successful businessman. He has these businesses around Seattle. And at the same time, practically, he runs the Seattle temple as he's driving around on his cell phone and things like that. And engaged in all kinds of devotional service. And at night, when we were staying at their house, they have this program. The kids come in and they sit in the living room. And then they take out their Bhagavatams. And then the kids read. Each one reads a few pages. And then one reads and then the other reads. 2 girls, I think one's 9 and the other one's 13 or 14, something like that. And then they discuss. And I could see they have a taste for it, and just by that, not for a long time, the kids have a taste for it. They're ready, they come in with their books, they sit down, the whole family listens, and the whole household is purified just by that one activity. Contrast that with, let's watch a movie, you know, turn on something, whatever, that's piped through, and who knows who wrote this stuff. I mean, you wonder who writes the scripts for a lot of these things. They're not enlightened. They don't have, and they have an agenda, actually. They want to sell you something, and so forth. And if you have that coming into your house and into your family, then there's a completely different result. Anyadevahur sambhavad, anyadahura sambhavat, iti shushumatiranam yenas tadvichakshire. The enlightened souls have told us that there's one result obtained from sitting and reading Srimad Bhagavatam with your daughters, and a completely different result from watching Walt Disney and whatever else there is available these days. And the chanting of Hare Krishna. So the Maha Mantra is mentioned in the Kali Santarana Upanishad as a 32-syllable, 16-word mantra. It's the perfect mantra coming from the spiritual world, which, according to the Kali Santarana, delivers one from all the evils of Kali Yuga. But we know even more than that, because the Mahamantra was delivered to us by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is non-different from Krishna in this particular age of Kali Yuga. And therefore, the Mahamantra is impregnated with prema. And by chanting Hare Krishna in this age, under the care of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, one will not just get deliverance from the material world, but will attain the highest destination, the spiritual, in the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. Anarpita charin chirat karuna yavatirna kalau samar payita unato dvalarasam supakti shriyam. And in that verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada translates the word shriyam as treasure. You can look that up in the word for word, and you'll see that the greatest treasure of all is waiting for us by worshiping Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this age of Kali by chanting Hare Krishna. So, I was noticing this morning when I was chanting my japa that there's this relationship in concentration, or a way in which the mind and these two fingers in which you use to chant the japa on the japa beads, they balance each other out, because you can keep pulling back your attention to the fact that you're rolling one bead at a time with one mantra, and then you can come back and listen to the mantra. And in this way you can practice for at least some time in the day the art of concentration, which is very valuable, and especially if you meditate on the vibration of the Hare Krishna mantra. So we're recommending this as a bona fide practice mentioned in the scripture that everyone can do and should do at home. And we have a few beads to pass out for those who don't have them. Gandharvika's here. She has a huge box of these meditation beads. Just happens to have them, carrying them around. And so let's, if you'll agree, we'll chant one round of japa. And if you don't have beads with you, grab some of these. And then on each bead we chant one mantra. And when we're finished chanting this, you can ask Gandharvika if you can have the beads. If you agree to chant at least one round a day without fail, I think you can have them for free. And if you're just going to take the beads, then they cost $100. That's fair. And then after we chant the one round of Hare Krishna on these beads, then we have waiting for you, calculate how many rooms you have in your house and how many are missing a set of Srimad Bhagavatams. And then you can order from Sri Krishna Purushottam and Ramanuj, who are here on the showroom floor, or Malini Devi Dasi, who's right here, a full set of Srimad Bhagavatam for each room in your house. And if your rooms are already full of Srimad Bhagavatams, then you can start thinking about your relatives. It's a great investment, because whatever money you have is going to float away from you anyway. Otherwise, you'll leave it in inheritance and someone will misuse it somewhere along the line, or they'll lose it to the government or something. Spend it on Srimad Bhagavatam. It says in the Kurma Purana that when you give the great gift of the Srimad Bhagavatam to others, then the result is that you get to go back home, back to Godhead. So that's a good investment. Don't you think? Okay. So we're going to chant in unison one round, and we start on the big fat end, unless you have beads that are even all the way through. You can start on either side. There's one bead at the top, which is called the Krishna bead. And we don't chant on that bead. We start just next to that Krishna bead. And we use these two fingers, the middle finger and the thumb, and we roll each bead between the finger and the thumb like this. And for instance, with one mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Remember, there's 32 syllables, and there's 16 words. Let your mind be satisfied with the sound of these words. It's a mantra. It has its own power. You don't have to invent anything. You don't have to try to force your mind to think about the form of Krishna or anything like that. You just have to keep bringing it back to the sound of the mantra, and the result will be natural and certain. I will first say together, I'll say the Panchatattva Mahamantra, which releases us from all sins, and then we'll chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and we'll sit up really straight and give full concentration. Make this the one round that changes your life forever. Okay? I'll say, and then you repeat the Panchatattva mantra. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So this is a bona fide scriptural process for meditation. This mantra, which comes from the ancient Vedas, can be uttered just above your breath, and you can listen to it for yourself, or you can chant it loudly, like as in singing, like we're about to do in a few minutes. But in either case, it's the most recommended process for elevation in spiritual life, especially in this present age of Kali Yuga, the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And another way to stay inspired to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and to elevate oneself in spiritual life is to keep the Srimad Bhagavatam in one's home, respect it, and read from the Bhagavatam. It has the most amazing philosophy anywhere in the world and the most beautiful poetry anywhere in the world. And it is recommended by all the liberated souls who say that just by hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, one can attain the highest perfection of life. So these two things, side by side, will surely have their effect, just as fire has an effect, whether one knows how it acts or not. And therefore, these are two ways that one can stay connected to the spiritual platform, and we're highly recommending them. And the beads that you have now, you can give back to Gandharvika Radha. She has a big box, she'll collect them. And if you'd like to keep some, if you don't have beads, we have a gift shop, you can purchase them, and you might be able to convince Gandharvika to give you a set. And also, there's a sign-up sheet for any of you who want to keep track of your meditation. You can sign up, and there are various levels that you can attain in this meditation, starting with doing 1 round a day like we just did. And then the one after that is 2, 4, 8, 12, and 16. And each one of them has a designation. So, Gandharvika, you have that? All that information? See her back there with the box, and she'll get you signed up on the sheet so you can start making progress. And week by week, you can check in and see what level you've attained to. Okay? And the next part of our program is a very joyful ceremony called Arati, where we're going to stand up and we'll put away all the books and seats. So, and then we're going to have room to dance and sing to our heart's content, something a lot of people don't get to do here in Silicon Valley on a regular basis. And we're going to sing the Hare Krishna mantra. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Gaur Premanande Haribo.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.